I'm Alicia Smith, and I am the president of the International Dyslexia Association Ontario branch. IDA Ontario is a charity that's run by volunteers like Joanne and myself. Our mission is to make the world a better place for individuals with dyslexia, and we try to do that by working to ensure that all of our teachers are empowered with the knowledge, skills, and resources necessary to teach every child to read. Thank you all for joining us today for the Right to Read Symposium. I had a chance to look over the registration list last night, and I have to say, wow, it was amazing to see. When I last checked, we had 1,876 people registered to join us today from right across Canada as well as internationally. And I'm so excited to welcome all of you today. This is a big moment for Ontario education, and I am thrilled that today we are bringing together teachers and administrators from 65 of Ontario's publicly funded school boards. We have people joining us today from the largest boards like the TDSB and the Ottawa Carleton Board, but also from our smallest boards like the Moose Factory Island District School Board and the Penetanguishene Separate School Board, which happens to be right down the road from where I live in tiny Ontario. Welcome to all of you. I was also excited to see that we have people joining us from many of our First Nations communities, including the Mississauga of the Credit and Stony Point First Nation. Welcome and Miigwech. We also have people joining us from school boards in other parts of Canada, like the Louis Riel School Board in Winnipeg and the Newfoundland and Labrador English School District. Welcome. Thank you as well to the representatives of our provincial teachers unions who are joining us today, and the delegation from the Ministry of Education of Ontario who is joining us. I was also thrilled to see that we have registrants joining us from 5 of Canada's other provincial ministries of education in other provinces. So thank you to all of you for joining us. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Patricia DeGuire, Chief Commissioner of the Ontario Human Rights Commission. Patricia has spent her life pushing boundaries to ensure access to justice, equality, and equity. Before being appointed Chief Commissioner of the Ontario Human Rights Commission in August 2021, Patricia served as Deputy Judge with the Ontario Superior Court of Justice on various tribunals and boards, and has played a leading role in many equity organizations, particularly related to anti-Black racism. She's a constitutional law scholar and an avid mentor and coach for young people and adults in the legal and other professions. Welcome, Chief Commissioner DeGuire, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for your kind and warm introduction, Madam President. Your radiance is infectious. Madam President of IDA, Alicia Smith, educators, education leaders, and other professionals who work with our children, a jolly good morning to you. I am glad, thrilled, honored to have been invited to speak with you today. Madam President, you have been a keen leader, a champion of reading issues for many years. You have helped in rallying your contacts and resources and have been an advocate, ally, an advisor, and an invaluable staunch supporter throughout the inquiry. Thank you. Educators, you are the leaders who are helping to chart a new path and help many vulnerable students navigate a challenging world to success, whatever that may be to them. Thank you. For the next few minutes, I shall engage you in high-level overview of the Ontario Human Rights Commission's Right to Read inquiry into human rights issues affecting students with reading disabilities in Ontario's public education system. For over 20 years, the Commission has exposed and challenged systemic discrimination in education by releasing policies on accessible education, making submissions and recommendations to governments, school boards, and post-secondary institutions, engaging in strategic litigation, and using its other powers under the code to that end. In 2020, in a case called Moore, the Supreme Court of Canada released a unanimous decision stating that learning to read is a basic and essential right. And despite those efforts, we continue to hear concerns about students' experience in Ontario's public education system, particularly related to reading disabilities. And so in 2019, we began a public inquiry into whether students with reading disabilities had meaningful access to education as required under the code. Our Right to Read report is the culmination of that inquiry. And the Commission believed that if the recommendations are implemented, there will be a huge positive impact on the lives of many students and families across Ontario. Children are struggling to learn to read. Right now, at least one child in every classroom in Ontario's public school is struggling to learn to read. Those same students may never learn to read and may face a lifetime of socioeconomic challenges because they cannot compete in today's high literacy world, or worse yet, having the disadvantage extend to future generations. Our children, our society deserve better than that. And that is why the Right to Read inquiry report calls for critical changes to Ontario's approach to early reading. The report combines the lived experience of students and parents, educators, and other professionals with research and guidance from experts to provide recommendations on curriculum and instructions, early screening, reading intervention, accommodation, professional assessment, and systemic issues. I repeat, learning to read is a human right. In 2012, the Supreme Court of Canada found that Jeffrey Moore, a student with dyslexia, had the right to receive the intensive support and intervention he needed to learn to read, and confirmed that learning to read is a basic and essential human right. And if you see the Right to Read report for the details of how and why learning to read is a basic and essential right. Under the Ontario Human Rights Code, duty holders have a legal duty and responsibility to remove any barrier that limits students' opportunities to learn and succeed. Alas, the system creates, deepens, and exacerbates disadvantage for many students. Learning to read is a critical building block for a lifelong sense of dignity and personal empowerment. It builds self-confidence, improves employment opportunities, and enhances physical, emotional, and mental well-being. The inquiry found many factors contribute to students being denied an equal right to read. For example, the inquiry has found that schools are not using evidence-based approaches to teach early reading. And as a result, students with reading disabilities and other students are failing to learn to read. Studies show that at least 1/3 of all Ontario students leave school without attaining the level of literacy that the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development deems essential to function fully in today's economy. Ontario's approach to screening students for reading difficulties is inconsistent, ad hoc, and relies mostly on non-evidence-based reading assessment. Many at-risk students are not identified or receive intervention early enough or at all. And when effective intervention do exist, access to them is hard or there is an excess demand. The evidence is that some students disproportionately experience higher rates of disability in reading, and their future can be irreparably harmed. Studies have shown the link between low literacy and marginalization, unemployment, increased risk for mental health addiction, homelessness, and issues with the youth justice or criminal justice system. Our Right to Read report outlines how these impacts can be prevented. The report includes recommendations to help students to learn to read and reduce the negative consequences experienced by students, their families, and society. And while the focus of the inquiry was on early word reading and reading disabilities such as dyslexia, the recommendations yield broader benefits for students with other disabilities and equality-seeking students like Blacks, Indigenous, multilingual, and students from lower socioeconomic background. With a systemic evidence-based approach, we can prevent reading failure in almost every child. I mentioned now the ministry's response to our inquiry. During the inquiry, we began to call on government and education partners to make substantive changes. The ministry has been receptive to hearing from the Commission throughout the inquiry and responded quickly to the release of the report. For example, the Ministry of Education's response to all recommendations include aligning the elementary English and French language curricula with scientific evidence-based approaches that emphasize direct and systemic instructions and eliminate the 3 queuing system by September 2023. And collaborating with partners, including faculties, on professional development for educators. The ministry also confirmed that $25 million in funding for evidence-based reading intervention programs and professional assessment will be available in 2020 to 2023. We will continue to monitor and review the steps the ministry has announced and will press forward to have the ministry and education partners implement other right to read recommendations, such as revising the kindergarten program and universal screening for every child. The release of our report is a call to action with guidelines. And as we have done in the past, we will continue to push for change and work with the communities. We will continue to call on all our partners in Ontario's education system to meet their legal duties and obligations under the Ontario Human Rights Code by removing barriers that limit students' opportunities to learn and succeed. The work will require partners, the work will require partners to funding collaboratively and to implement wide range changes. It will also require sufficient and sustainable funding. The Ontario Human Rights Commission will continue to push for change and call for opportunities, and we'll call on our stakeholders and expert advocacies organizations such as the IDA of Ontario to help monitor developments and to continue a call to action. Every educator, advocate, and leader here today are already playing a part in improving the future for students with reading disabilities. And I entreat you to continue this important life-changing work. COVID-19 has exposed many other hidden inequity issues, and the global uprising to root out anti-Black racism continues. These have created a new sense of urgency, though. They afford an epoch to reculturalize our school through human rights lens. Students, families, and educators across Ontario are depending on us for our children's future, for the future of having a thriving Ontario. Let us collaborate now to bring about that change they need. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Patricia. We truly appreciate all of the work the Ontario Human Rights Commission has done and the clear recommendations that you have provided to help us obtain equity for all students. And thank you for your time and expertise today in helping us launch our Right to Read Symposium. Now, the Right to Read Inquiry Report is based on extensive research into science of reading in order to find the most effective teaching practices to help all students learn to read. Our next guest is a surprise guest, Dr. Maria Murray. She is one of the many who have come together to create a common definition of the science of reading. She is founder, president, and CEO of the Reading League, a not-for-profit organization whose mission is to advance the awareness, understanding, and use of evidence-aligned reading instruction. Dr. Murray is passionate regarding the prevention and remediation of reading difficulties and consistently strives to increase educator knowledge and the connections between research and practice. We are very fortunate today to have Dr. Murray with us to define the science of reading. Good morning, Dr. Murray, and welcome.
Hello to everyone tuning in today. Thank you very much, Joanne. And thank you for the amazing, inspiring opening message, Chief Commissioner DeGuire. My heart is aflutter having listened to it. I am so honored to have been asked to open up this very important, if not historical and momentous symposium. Truly, congratulations to everyone involved with the Ontario Human Rights Commission, who has worked with determination and purpose the last years to make today a promised reality. Congratulations for recognizing and making clear the truth that is this, and we should hear it many times today, learning to read is a human right. The first pages in the recently released defining guide, the Science of Reading Defining Guide, features a preamble that parallels the right to read inquiry's truth. It recognizes that literacy is a fundamental human right that empowers individuals in a society. It goes on to say that we are resolved to prevent the collateral damage that is incurred by our students, especially the most vulnerable among them, when adults have limited access to the convergent scientific evidence. The Reading League joined the determined coalition of science of reading advocates who wrote the defining guide. We met for over a year weekly to promote a definition of the science of reading, and we did this in order to clarify what is meant by that term. We did this so that the decisions or questions asked by stakeholders such as educators, parents, publishers, policymakers, and others, so that their questions and decisions would be guided by the promise of successful outcomes in our classrooms. Frankly, there is a body of research that has been completely absent from teacher and administrator preparation programs for too long, absent from popular curricular materials, and absent from legislative policies. What it teaches us about how the brain reads, why it has difficulty doing so sometimes, and what can be done to prevent and remediate difficulties is too important to misunderstand. In recent years, the body of scientific studies of reading has finally emerged from university labs, largely due to a flurry of podcasts, blog posts, social media platforms, and of course, reports of successful reading outcomes blooming everywhere. As it goes, when there is a flurry of attention and education, something good and important can turn into a catchphrase. Yes, the science of reading has become a catchphrase. This flurry from various information outcomes has led to a lack of consistent messaging. And a catchphrase this popular ultimately leads to widespread misunderstandings of what it truly represents. And sadly, misunderstandings lead to misuse or underuse of the findings from the science of reading. I'll give you some examples here. Indeed, many of us from the Defining Guides Coalition had been noticing social media posts stating that because a school was now teaching phonics, they were doing the science of reading. Posts by teachers stated that they had tried the science of reading, but it wasn't working. An administrator once posted asking what science of reading program to buy because he was in a meeting and they needed to decide. These were alarming because they revealed that the term was being used in an inconsistent, haphazard way. They indicated to us a need for clarification. Without clarity of what the science of reading is, what it stands for, what it means, the chances of educators being able to both understand it and apply its findings to practice using effective assessment and instructional tools are jeopardized. And then the chances that children will get the instruction they deserve in order to learn to read are compromised. So this is why clarification of what is meant by the science of reading is needed. What exactly is the science of reading? Without going further, I will read you the definition. You will notice that it is very similar to the definition in the Right to Read inquiry. The science of reading is a vast interdisciplinary body of scientifically based research about reading and issues related to reading and writing. This research has been conducted over the last 5 decades across the world, and it is derived from thousands of studies conducted in multiple languages. The science of reading has culminated in a preponderance of evidence to inform how proficient reading and writing develop, why some have difficulty, and how we can most effectively assess and teach, and therefore improve student outcomes through prevention of and intervention for reading difficulties. The coalition understood that the word science in the phrase science of reading is what we needed to key in on. We needed to expand on that word. We needed to make clear what kind of research that word is referring to and why it is important. The science of reading is referring to scientifically based reading research because the bulk of studies comprising that vast body of knowledge features experimental and quasi-experimental research designs. And those are the designs that clarify causal relationships. These research designs are the best tools to identify, for example, types of instruction that lead to better outcomes. Other kinds of reading research include qualitative studies, correlation research, observational studies, and others. And each of those, in turn, is ideal when researchers want to build knowledge and find answers other than seeking to identify causal claims. Now, there is pushback occasionally from reading researchers who employ some of the other research methodologies. They may sense that because the science of reading is in all the news these days, that their research is excluded or not as valued. They should not feel excluded from the table of knowledge about reading because all kinds of knowledge inform us. If we were to lean only on the science of reading, we would have an incomplete and lopsided understanding about reading and literacy. So no one should rebuff the science of reading and suggest that there are lots of other kinds of research and that the science of reading is excluding them. In truth, the very fact that Ontario's momentous inquiry required an investment of years to investigate the scope of factors affecting children's reading outcomes, factors including early screening, curriculum and instruction, reading intervention, accommodations, students and families, ministries of education, school boards, faculties of education, and more. The fact that it took so long to investigate these factors starkly illustrates that the kind of research that has been excluded is the science of reading. Had it not been excluded for so long, would we be where we are right now? Thousands, if not millions, of educators can readily attest to the fact that they never learned about the science of reading. Syllabi, textbooks, and published materials for educators from the past decades can be brought to a table today, right here, and provide us glaring proof that the science of reading has been excluded. Legislation supporting the science of reading didn't exist just a few short years ago. It had been excluded. So the other kinds of research being excluded argument doesn't hold up. It has actually dominated. The science of reading has been accumulating for decades, and now it is being embraced, adopted, implemented, and results emerging from classrooms reinforce the successful outcomes that scientists had been trying to promote for years. Educators and stakeholders will no longer be sidelined from knowing about the science of reading. It deserves its place at the table alongside all other kinds of research. Our educators and children deserve this much. And another thing they deserve is to learn from the science of reading without being influenced by unsound fallacies surrounding it. To that end, the defining guide also features a page devoted to what the science of reading is not. It is not an ideology or philosophy. It is not a fad, trend, new idea, or pendulum swing. The science of reading is not a political agenda, nor is it a one-size-fits-all approach or program of instruction. Finally, the science of reading is not a single specific component of instruction. The science of reading is not just phonics. So, because the science of reading is not just phonics, it is our hope that the tireless whole language versus phonics debate can be put to rest. Politics does not belong in classrooms. Successful instruction does belong in classrooms. And successful instruction includes much more than phonics. We all know that. Oral language, morphology, building of background knowledge, vocabulary, so much more. Because it's now understood that the science of reading isn't a pendulum swing, it's our hope that people will come to understand that that's not how science works. Science thuds, building and evolving over time. It doesn't swing. For example, it's safe to say that no one is likely to ever walk into a classroom or school and say, oh, we've got it wrong. Oh dear, it turns out that phoneme awareness isn't important for reading development after all. Again, scientific research is derived from many thousands of studies from many disciplines. Over time, studies can converge and even reach a consensus on important aspects of reading. So science cannot swing like a pendulum. You know where the pendulum swings come from in education? From theories and practices driven by multi-million-dollar marketing departments. Because the science of reading is clearly not a program, it's our hope that accusations directed towards scientists and science of reading advocates, accusing them of being pawns of a curriculum publishing industry, will end. Such accusations distract from the work that needs to be done. The work that needs to be done is building educator knowledge. This includes all kinds of educators, and I want to emphasize administrators in this group. Evidence-aligned curricula are very important and very necessary, but the best program in the hands of a teacher lacking knowledge will not result in the outcomes that are possible. Each practitioner needs and deserves proper training. Knowledge building should be program neutral too. A teacher is the deliverer of instruction, and ongoing investment in that teacher's knowledge about the science of reading is critical. No quick fixes or bypassing of this. Knowledge must come first. In fact, knowledge first is the North Star underpinning the Reading League's mission. There's a body of evidence and knowledge produced by scientists from all over the world, and it holds the promise of successful reading for all kinds of learners. We can no longer withhold this knowledge from our educators. The Reading League promotes knowledge in everything it does via its journal, aptly named the Reading League Journal, its live events, online academy, webinars, and more. Get your hands on a copy of the Defining Guide. It's a great first step to understanding the science of reading, and that's why we created it. The Reading League provides educators at all levels with knowledge about the science of reading and supports them whether they're taking those first steps or whether they've been at it for years. We are learning together. And we hope that our friends in Ontario can travel south a bit to Syracuse in October to attend our annual conference. We would love to meet you and welcome you. On behalf of the Reading League staff, board, chapters, members, allied organizations, including the Defining Guide Coalition, we applaud the Right to Read inquiry. Congratulations again, Ontario, IDEA Ontario, wow, for the opportunity you have created for your educators. They are poised to experience successes commensurate with the high levels of work they put in for their students. The world will enjoy following your success, I have no doubt. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much for that. And we do have a number of questions, Maria. I was hoping we could take a few more seconds of your time and ask you a couple of those, since we're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is fantastic. So if you don't mind, I'll ask you a couple of those. The first question is about communicating the science of reading to administrators and teachers. It's phrased in the way of how would a parent communicate this, but I think it's an important topic as well for administrators to think about how they could communicate the information about the science of reading to the teachers as well. So do you have any tips or suggestions on a good way to approach this topic with educators?
I highly encourage this guide. I mean, there's so much more to it than I could have possibly covered today. It has the basic underlying models, the instructional practices that align and do not align, the science of reading, including learners with linguistic differences, MTSS frameworks, and I love this piece, a call to action for all stakeholders, and this includes educators, administrators, school boards, state departments of education, schools of education, pediatricians, publishers, professional learning providers, federal agencies, private foundations, policymakers, professional literacy organizations, reading scientists, and parents and caregivers. All of us have a distinct and important role to play. We are all levers in this gigantic enterprise of getting knowledge to practitioners. That's why the scientists do what they do. They do it for the children out there. They provide this, they do this work so that practitioners have knowledge. So we have to get that knowledge out there in any way possible.
Thanks. I see a number of people as well in the chat and in the questions were asking where they can get a copy of the guide. So
of course, I assume someone can put that in the chat too. It's on thereadingleague.org. There's a shop tab, and they're pretty low cost. We keep them as close to cost as possible for everybody. We want them in hands. We want them in school boards. We want them in parent organizations and so forth. Thank you to people who are sharing it. Thank you.
Thanks. I would also encourage everyone to visit the Reading League website. As Maria said, there's so many fantastic resources on your site, lots and lots of videos, recorded webinars, ongoing courses that I would really encourage everyone to take advantage of. And I think Joanne might have an additional question.
Yes, I'm pasting the link to the guide again. It's been 2 times, but now it's 3 times. So
thank you, ladies. Thank you, friends.
Yes, you made a comment about phonemic awareness no longer, well, having been found to not be important to learning to read. This is quite controversial because we have a lot of school boards, well, some school boards who have embarked in teaching phonemic awareness a good deal in the early reading time for students, JK and SK, junior kindergarten and senior kindergarten. Could you make a comment about that? Tell us how it's not important to teach phonemic awareness to children, or how phonemic awareness is not essential for learning to read.
Oh, no. If that might be a misunderstanding. What I said was that it's very unlikely. Science doesn't swing. It's not a pendulum. And as an example, kind of a little snarky way, I said, please, let's be clear on this. It is very unlikely that anyone would ever come into a classroom and say such a thing, right? Because it's such a known, I mean, phonological awareness is one of the leading causal factors on good reading development. It's a must-have. It's a non-negotiable. No. So go back and replay what I said. I will reread it. This is important. I said, no, I don't want any misunderstandings on that. Yikes.
Okay.
Yeah, I said it's unlikely anyone would ever go into a classroom and say, no, it's not important. We made a mistake. It's not going to happen. It's not a pendulum swing that someday we're going to hear it's not important and then it'll be something else, right? Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for asking me that. Yikes. Phew. I see the comments coming in. Phew.
Okay. Now, here's another question. There's a great need at secondary level to improve student reading, both decoding and fluency. It has been made worse by the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Have any suggestions for high yield approaches?
Yeah. Yes, we do. The Reading League stays away from recommending programs, but approaches have to align with how the brain must function in order to process print and language and sound. So that approach is a non-negotiable for students who are of any age, adults. I've even tutored people in their 20s and 50s. So they need the same thing a second or third grader needs too. You try to make it more sophisticated and mature in the materials you use, but absolutely they need the same thing because they need what they didn't get.
Yes, I do. There's something on your website that is very precious, and that is the red and green guide. The curriculum evaluation tool.
Yes, and that is yesterday afternoon, and we are working on important revisions of that because we felt that some parts of it needed more explanation. We needed to give the directions more explicitly on how to use it. So, and then we want to get some reliability work done on it as well, and then expand it. So we're very excited. Look for that. We hope to have at least another new version out very quickly so that schools who are poised to make some decisions can use it quickly.
It's a good basic tool at the moment anyway, wouldn't you find?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, at least it gives you things to avoid, right? Like, do not eat this and hope to lose weight. Do not use this program and hope to, or whatever, this kind of instruction. And I'll just say it, similar to what Chief Commissioner DeGuire said, queuing systems and so forth. That's a red flag. So,
Thank you so much for answering that. I will put the link to that guide in our chat very soon. And with the proviso that it's being, that's wonderful.
Being updated, but at least people can get a peek of what it looks like right now. It's the curriculum evaluation tool. And I encourage people who use that to read the glossary so they know what we mean by those terms, and to, if they're not sure about what any of it means, to work with someone else in using it.
Yes, yes. We have a little question about back to phonemic awareness. When's a good time to begin?
Oh, well, phonemic awareness, or I would even begin earlier at the phonological awareness, the larger language types, right? I encourage when children are very little and starting language to sing to them, to talk to them, to everything. I used to have my kids in the car seat and I didn't play the movies in my minivan. I talked to them and had them give me first sounds and all that. So it's never too early to begin having our children's brains become aware of elements in our speech streams. Never too early.
Even in JK, I had students with sentences. We would hop every time there was a word.
How cute. Yes.
Yes.
I mean, we take for granted things like word awareness. Like, of course, kids are aware of words, but no, think of my son used to take Chinese through high school and college. And when he would say a Chinese sentence, I had no idea where the word boundaries were. It sounded like a stream. So that's what happens with our children. We can't take for granted that this is easy work for them.
That's true. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess we're approaching time for our break. So I just want to thank you so much for all the work you've done. And you've made
you too.
Right. And so you've made reading accessible for everyone. You've brought practice with a link to research. And we appreciate that. We appreciate the models. We appreciate all the research and the contributions you're making. It's really helping us in Ontario and Canada.
There's a lot of wonderful organizations in this world right now doing this great work, and we love partnering with them and being allies. That's what the whole league concept is. So thank you.
Thank you so much.